Okay, so we are recording our final episode of our Summer of Spielberg. It's still hot. We've said it's hot in every episode, and this is another hot one. This is a highly anticipated release. I think Michelle and I really started this podcast because we wanted to review this movie. And we are very happy to have Dom back as a guest. We only bring him in for time travel related movies. That's his specialty. So, Dom, welcome back to the pod. I want to start with you, and I want to know what your first memories of this movie.
I can't remember the first time I've seen it. I've always just had the memory of seeing the movie and knowing the movie. But my first memory is probably around 20 years ago. Fellow friend of the pod, Thomas. I saw the movie with him, and I saw the movie a bunch of times before watching it with him. I just like surface level enjoyed the movie, kind of got what was going on and enjoyed it. And then he pointed out all these little secrets in the movie that I never acknowledged. For example, the Twin Pines Mall. How when Michelle knows this. I don't think Laura knows this, but like when he time travels and knocks down the pine, it turns into Lone Pine Mall when he goes back to the future. And when I watched with Thomas, he's like, "Did you know that they changed the name from Twin Pines to Lone Pine Mall?" And it blew my mind. I was like, I didn't know movies could do this. I didn't know that there could be these secrets that you have to pay attention to notice in the movie. Like Huey Lewis is one of the judges in the high school band competition, and I was like, you could have cameos in a movie. Like I never noticed this, and so ever since then, every time I watch the movie, there's always something else I noticed. It rewards repeat viewing. Laura and I just watched it again right before recording this. There's other things that I picked up that I never noticed before, and it's very rare for a movie to gain something new after seeing it so many times.
All right, Michelle. Well, for those of you who are not watching this on video, Michelle has gone all out for this final episode. She is dressed as Lorraine Baines, not Lorraine McFly. So she is in 1955 full costume right now. She even went as far as to pick a flower from her garden and put it in her hair. And she's a beautiful peach gown on. So Dom actually unintentionally did this, but he is wearing a puffer jacket, which he wears every day. So he's really bringing the Coast Guard look. They really carry that joke throughout the entire portion of the 1955 movie. I am going for the kind of like lime green, more like an 80s look. So I needed some 80s representation in this. But Michelle, as much as we have grown up with this movie, watching it together, talking about it, drooling over it every single time we talk about it, I actually don't know your first memories of watching this movie. So please share.
This movie is so important to me. I have a rich history with it. I typically, when I prepare for this, I just write notes like in the notes app in my phone. And for this episode, I wrote an entire second note, which kind of turned into an essay about how I love one of the scenes. So apologies in advance that I might be a little like over the top about my enthusiasm about this episode. Even with just Dom giving his background, like the vein in my forehead was like popping out because I was like smiling so much. So with all of that to say, I'm going to start with something that I'll include in the video version of the podcast. But for now, I have documentation of the first time that I saw this movie. During the pandemic, as many of us did, our parents were doing some decluttering. And our mom and dad sent me this photo. And it's a photograph of a note that I left for my dad. And I'm going to read the note. I will also post it on YouTube. And it says, "Dad, I made lunches for you." And as an anecdote, our dad always made our school lunches so for whatever reason, I chipped in and helped out at this time. The next line, and this is all in all caps, I said, "The Red Wings have won the cup. I taped the third period. Can you shut off the VCR in the basement? And then I go on to say, Back to the Future was really good, but it left at a cliffhanger, and now we have to rent the sequel. Heart, Michelle.
Michelle, are you telling us you mailed a letter to yourself in the future?
I think so. This is like my Western Union moment. Based on the information that we have in this note, the Detroit Red Wings
won the cup.
Won the Stanley Cup in 1997 and 1998. I'm going to guess that this was in 1997. I would have been in eighth, like the end of eighth grade. This 1997 viewing was the beginning of my love affair with this movie that has gone on to now. And I feel like I have to give a retraction of something that I said in our You've Got Mail episode, which was for a while, I would say like Back to the Future is my favorite movie. And then I was kind of feeling like, no, maybe You've Got Mail is. I'm taking it back. It is 100% Back to the Future. There's no comparison. Into my high school years, I bought a bunch of like photo still postcards from the movies, which hung in my locker all throughout high school. Going on through life, I've watched this movie consistently, including Back to the Future 2 and Back to the Future 3. I think that Back to the Future 2 is my actual favorite movie, but I feel like it's too complicated to like give that answer. So I always just say the first one. In my adult life, the highlight of my Back to the Future experience was seeing it with the Jacksonville Symphony. It was the first like symphony movie experience I had been to. And it was extra special because the composer, Alan Silvestri, was there and he spoke at the event. I think that his wife or partner is from the area, so he happened to be in town. So that was like really cool to have that experience. And I don't know if this is what they do at all of them, but I felt like my favorite moment of that experience was they do an intermission during these like the symphony movie combos, and they did like an entr'acte, which is like the music that they play before they start the second act. And because there is no entr'acte in most movies, they played the section of music that they play in the trailer for Back to the Future 3, which is also like the Back to the Future 3 theme. The score is so good. The Back to the Future 3 score is brilliant because it's the same thing, but like westernized. It has elements of like kind of that like 1960s Western music. Have you ever had like moments in life that are, you're just like, I could not be happier than I am right now in this moment? And it's ridiculous, but hearing that little section of music, which was just unexpected, and everyone who was there was such like a big fan, and we were like, we know what this is. It was the best thing ever. So that's my history with Back to the Future.
Michelle wins.
That was a very meta monologue. You changed history. You went back, changed your favorite movie.
Yes.
From You've Got Mail to Back to the Future. I mean, doesn't this movie make you want to just like ponder and like share facts?
And I'm sorry, you reminded me. I have one other part of my story that I have to bring up. The Back to the Future trilogy came out on DVD when I was in college. Another like best moment of my life, like one of the best gifts I ever got. And because I was in college and had a little bit of a longer break, I have memories of sitting upstairs in our house, in our parents' house, in the command center. For anyone who was ever in our house growing up knows it as the center of the upstairs of our house, where our dad's like office was, but it was like an open space. And I guess that was maybe one of the only computers that we had access to. And I remember sitting at that desk and watching every single piece of content that was on those DVDs. So all of the commentary, all of the behind the scenes, like every second of it. And that was the first movie I had ever, kind of like what Dom said, like when he was watching it with Thomas and he was like, I didn't know that this could happen in movies. I didn't know that like DVD commentaries existed until I got that set. And again, like just best thing ever. Best
The
invention.
commentary is probably so good for this movie.
It's so rich. Yes.
That is amazing. I didn't know that at all. And I just got so nostalgic about the 90s and making school lunches. So thank you so much. I'm so happy that we have Dom on for this episode too, because everything the two of you just explained, I think when you think about these types of movies, there's kind of two buckets. It's like, this is a blockbuster, right? So everyone and their mother has seen it. But then there's like the movie nerds. It's great that I think that all of us are very open-minded, that it's so fun for us to find new facts. So we don't know everything. We're kind of at like the learning stage. I have always felt like a nerd at heart and have never been able to like express it until I was an adult, or maybe until I found Dom, because this is one of those really nerdy things. Like, I remember when Dom and I first started dating, he told me that he never really would ever think about getting a tattoo, but when he was younger, he wanted the Back to the Future tattoo. And I was like, that's someone who loves this movie. But I feel like there's a lot of people who have maybe not as deep of a story as you, Michelle, but have just a lot of affinity for this. For me, I don't really have a first memory of it. When Dom and I went to go sit and watch this today, I kept thinking I hadn't sat down and really watched it from the beginning in a very long time. This is one of those movies that, because it was always on TV, and Michelle, because we had the DVD set in my childhood years, I do associate this a lot with our trip to Universal and going on in the car in the ride. And it was an attraction that I actually really enjoyed, because maybe I was a little bit younger. And then into recent years, Dom and I have been together for a very long time, and we haven't done too many Halloween costumes together, but a few weeks after we started dating was Halloween, and we were Jennifer and Marty. And I have to say, our costumes were pretty fantastic. Dom sadly does not still have the red vest. We've been getting rid of a lot of stuff, but I don't think it made it out with us to California.
Can I make 2 points?
Of course.
Or add 2 things to what Laura said? So one, I too have been on the Back to the Future ride at Universal, and this was a really long time ago. I'm not the most adventurous person, and I remember being on the ride thinking this is the scariest thing I've ever been on in my life. Because you're in the DeLorean and there's like a video screen, right, of you flying around. It was so loud, and I remember it crashes through an Exxon sign, and I was like, I think I'm gonna have a heart attack right now. And there was a kid younger than me next to me who like could not care less. So it's safe to say I came out stronger out of that experience. That was also on that trip. I went on the Jaws ride too, and I think I was also gonna have a heart attack on that ride as well. That's a whole other story. And then the other thing I wanted to say, and this is a point that I wanted to make, and Laura mentioned it, how you can watch this movie in 2 ways. And I think the best movies, the best TV shows work that way. Like a modern example I can think of is Succession. I feel like a show like Succession that Laura and I are really big fans of. You can watch that show different ways. You can watch it as which of the siblings is gonna take over the company, or you can watch it as like a comedy. You can watch it as a drama of like this messed up relationship they have with their father. Like, there's different ways you can watch the show, and everyone's has equal enjoyment out of watching the show. Whereas Back to the Future, you can watch it as a pretty bizarre and weird comedy with some weird Oedipal love triangles going on there. Or you can watch it as like a buddy comedy between Marty and Doc. Or you can watch it as kind of like you can look for clues throughout the movie. When I watched it today, I was more so just keeping a lookout for different little tidbits throughout that were kind of callbacks to previous things in the movie. It's great.
Well, Michelle, it really seems like you hate this movie. So why don't we, I want to hear from you. What are your absolute favorite things about this movie?
Dom mentioned this already, but by far the strongest thing about this movie is they do so many things to set up and let the audience be involved in the experience of this movie. And the way that they do it is so masterful, because it's not essential for you to be able to understand what's going on, but every time you watch it, you notice something new. When you do notice them, you just realize how incredibly smart Bob Gale, who is the writer, was to be able to write in this way. I found two interesting facts about this script on IMDb. The first of which is that this script was rejected 44 times before it was greenlit, which would hope makes all of us as, writer creators happy, that we should keep going after our dreams. But also that the University of Southern California's film school writing classes use the screenplay for Back to the Future as a model for what they call a perfect screenplay. And I cannot agree more. I want to get more into this when we get to our scenes section, but I think that this script, it's so tight and there's just the right amount of information in there to keep the audience informed, but also to keep it moving. One or both of you already said this, but it really is the kind of movie where you can experience it however you want it, however involved you want to be. It's going to be great no matter what.
I love that you said they give you just as much information, because I talked a little bit about how it brought out the nerd in me, always loving this movie. But I think with sci-fi adjacent movies, I wouldn't call this a full sci-fi movie, you can get really hung up in some of the details, and just the idea behind like a flux capacitor and a gigawatt and all these things they were able to explain to the audience so well, yet also turn it into a comedy. So many of those lines and the things that Doc explains are by far my favorite part of the movie, because it's such great comedy. It's really hard to do that.
If you sit and think about the explanation for how they do time travel, it makes absolutely no sense. But the way it's written in the screenplay and the way Christopher Lloyd explains it to Marty, it made you're like, oh, of course, that's how you do time travel. Like, why haven't we done that already? It's so simple. There's so many things left unexplained that really do not bother me. Like, why is Marty, a high school student, friends with this mad scientist in the town? Why in the 1950s does Doc live in a massive ski lodge in the middle of town? Like, what is his occupation? It really doesn't matter. Like, it's really, you're along for the ride. And I really don't need to know the backstory for all these people, because I'm just like, and that's really like a testament to the performances. It really does not make sense why Doc and Marty are friends, but their relationship is so real and their performances are so good and bounce off each other that you see them like, oh, they're friends. That makes sense. I don't need to question that.
I'm actually curious now that you've brought it up, because we went right into this recording. What are some things this time around that you noticed that after all these times you've watched it, that you noticed it for the first time?
This isn't something I noticed for the first time, but I really had a hard time getting through the scenes in the 50s with Marty and his mom. It was pretty uncomfortable, and I don't know if just the older I get, the more I think about the situations. It's pretty wild what they have going on in that script. When they're in the car and he's looking up and down, I was like, that's your mom. You really shouldn't be doing that.
Is there anything for all of the times you've seen it that the things that just hold up really well for you and you love every single time?
Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd are unreal in this movie. They're both so good. Like, I know it's kind of a light comedy, like not that serious, but I was actually getting emotional towards the end when, Marty's trying to get back to the future and he's trying to tell Doc that he's shot. He's trying to protect his friend and tell him, you have to prepare yourself. They're so comfortable with one another. And I don't know if either of you have seen the test footage of Eric Stoltz. Before Michael J. Fox was hired, they had Eric Stoltz in the role as Marty McFly, and they kind of went through filming a few scenes until they realized that he wasn't the right fit, and that's when they brought Michael J. Fox on. And you can find some of the test footage that they have. It's some of the exact same scenes that ended up in the movie, but it's with Eric Stoltz in the role instead of Michael J. Fox. And even just watch it without the sound on, you just feel that Eric Stoltz is not the right person for that role. It's just a feeling you have. There's really no way to describe it. And here's just a great example of being able to see footage of someone else in that role and wondering if Michael J. Fox, who's perfect in this role, like, could anyone do it? Is it more of the writing or is it the acting? And it's 100% the acting, because the same script, same supporting cast, same everything, and just change the actor, and it completely changes the feeling of the movie, and it's just not the right fit. And I think that the parents, and I think some of the supporting roles are good also, but it really, to me, what stood out was Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd. They were so great, especially Christopher Lloyd. I mean, that's a pretty wacky role, being this mad scientist with no backstory or anything, and you genuinely are like interested in him, and are genuinely upset that he has no idea that like what his future is going to bring and stuff. And I don't know, I was just really blown away by the two of them.
I was going to ask you guys this because I was reflecting last night when I was watching. I think that I watched this movie for the first time at a perfect age, that I was old enough to pay attention, but I was still young enough to like not be poking holes in the story or like looking for things to be wrong, like with like a film critic eye. I think that the first time I watched it, I was so drawn into this story, and I didn't really know who the actors were, that I was really surprised to find out afterwards that Leah Thompson and Crispin Glover and Tom Wilson, who are the parents, and Biff and Michael J. Fox are like all the same age. Like I was so like captivated by like that first introduction of them being old. And I don't know, like, thinking about it now, I'm thinking like, how could I possibly think that they were old people? And clearly when you see them on screen together when they're in 1955, they look like they're the same age, but something weird was happening in my head where that was like a big shock to me.
I think we've talked a lot about this in previous episodes, but it's so different watching films when you're young because you're not a critic. It's more fun to look for Easter eggs and just enjoy it. But I think if I was young and I found that out, my mind probably would have been blown. I think you're also, when you're younger, not even watching movies, you never really have any concept of how old anyone is. Adults are adults. Watching it this time around, I felt like Marty and Michael J. Fox, like he's very well cast for this, because Dom and I actually just watched his documentary Still, which I was getting so emotional watching this time around because I've always had such an appreciation for Michael J. Fox, but if you have not watched that documentary, it just came out. He was cast in the ongoing sitcom Family Ties. So he historically got roles because he looked younger but was older. So he had the maturity to play these really difficult roles. So in this case, he's a high schooler, and when he goes back in time, he's still supposed to be a high schooler, but you kind of expect him to be in this like, you need like more adult aspects of it, more mature aspects of it, that he's like hanging out with this older scientist, is maybe like more open-minded, and almost has this so much more maturity than his parents when he goes back and is with them, because maybe he knows so much. But I think that Michael J. Fox just really leans into this role. And like Dom said, it's two of them. I think the chemistry between both of them is what really makes this movie. But I think Michael J. Fox just really like leaned into this. Because of the documentary, they talk about how he still needed to be on the show that he was filming while filming this. So basically for, I think they said about 4 months, he didn't sleep at all, right? There were a couple of scenes, which I don't think that they did this purposely, but he looks like very tired or just wiped out. I mean, from like a writer's perspective, he did just go back in time. He's going through all these stressful and mind-blowing experiences. But when he's like sitting at the bar at Lou's with his dad and he like has a cup of coffee, he looks like he hasn't slept in like 6 days. Like he's sweaty. There's just a lot going on. So I think I had in my mind so much during this movie, wow, he's playing like such a performance and he must be so exhausted while doing this. He's so amazing in this movie. And I think that if I had to pick someone who wins it, he definitely does.
Do you guys want to kind of shout out our favorite like set up items.
So there's a lot of setups in the A portion of the script. So like in the beginning when the whole family is sitting and his dad is like cracking up at the sitcom that's on TV with his brother. And then when he goes back to 1955 and he's at dinner at Lorraine's house, they're watching that same exact episode. And everyone's very confused as to how.
See?
You didn't notice that?
I had just learned something new.
Yeah.
I knew they're watching, what is it, Honeymooners that they're watching in the
Yeah.
50s. I never noticed what show they were watching in the 80s.
The reason this is like a script dream is because it's very structured, but not boring structured. Like they're able to take things and continue it throughout, whether it's a joke or things that they really set you up with that they end up using later. It's very meta in a way because we're talking about time travel, right? And if you think about, oh, if I were to go back in time, I would have done this to set me up for this. And in a way, like the whole script is setting you up to bring you back in time to set you up for something else. And the first portion of the movie, like I would much rather be stuck as much as I love like Doc and Marty's life in the 80s, I love like the 1955 setting. Like I'd rather be stuck there. But I think to your point, Michelle, the first like portion of the movie is so important because it's all of these Easter eggs or things that they're setting up or sprinkling in so that when we go back in time, it's like time changes, but it doesn't.
There's another little I don't know that Easter egg is the right like Easter egg.
It's not Easter egg
because it implies that it's hidden, but like a visual cue.
It's almost like it's foreshadowing. Sorry, that's what it
foreshadowing.
Yeah.
So in one of the first scenes when Marty and Jennifer are in the town square, we see a truck go by with Mayor Goldie Wilson's like campaign posters on the side of it, so that when we end up in 1955 and we see that actor and he starts, obviously there's that great joke where Marty says like, yeah, he's going to be mayor. And he's like, mayor. Yeah. I feel like that's just one of so many examples of they give us something and then it shows up. It's payoff after payoff after payoff.
There's a lot of kind of darker ones too, because on the bright side of Marty needing to do all this, which I know is the happy part of this number one movie, that he gets to potentially change things, whether or not he likes it. And as much as we all cringe at the car scene, him and Lorraine have that kind of like darker dialogue, basically implying that she turns out an alcoholic, so she shouldn't drink so much. And we see like how awful she looks in that opening scene of her drinking that awful vodka that she's drinking. Dom, is there any that you can think of?
I'm just going to go back to the one I mentioned earlier about the Lone Pine and the Twin Pine Ball. And that's because for the longest time, it felt like my secret for the movie. Like whenever I'd watch the movie with someone and that scene came up, I'd be like, if you pay attention, it actually becomes the Lone Pine Mall because he hits the tree. People would be like, I don't care. I knew that already. So, but it felt like my little Easter egg that no one else knew about. They really spell it out for you because when he's driving with the farmers, like, my pines, he ran over my pines. I was like, oh, okay, I guess it wasn't that subtle.
There was a moment, and I don't know if this is just a Doc-ism and how he reacts to a lot of things, because he reacts to a lot of things that Marty says with a very surprised question. But if, Michelle, you're pretty well versed in the future movies, I was wondering if this is like a nod to one of those or if it means anything at all. But he says right before he's sent back to 1985, he says to Doc, I've never seen my dad like punch anyone like that in his life. And Doc says, oh, really? Like he's so surprised. And I couldn't figure out like if that was because he doesn't know his dad, right? But it felt like he was acting like he knew him, and that seemed very like uncharacteristic. And I can't remember how much his dad is in like the future movies, but is there like an instance where he like punches someone? Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm like looking way too much into that, but
differently. When Doc looks surprised that he thinks that because Marty changed the course of events, that because he's never punched someone before, but now he has, that may negatively impact things in the future. But he doesn't have time to
process
because they're like on the clock. So he's like, whatever, forget about it. That's how I read it.
Yeah, I read it the same way as Dom, and I think it was just another one of these little indicators that when we end up back in 1985, like that's a big part of the explanation as to why things are so different when he goes back. What do you guys think about the clock tower lightning storm as this significant historical event and being like the device that makes everything work?
I love it. I really do. It's hard to express your emotions of when you were watching this when you were a kid, but I always remember having this sense of anxiety during that entire sequence of it being really dark, them narrowing in on like the panther mouth or whatever it is, the concrete breaking when he's standing it, time is ticking. There's just like the stakes are so high in this moment. And I think if it was anything else, it wouldn't be as dramatic. And again, I think there's so many aspects of this script, Michelle, like you said, that they create tension in every single scene just so well. It's like, of course, this is used as a example for so many aspiring screenwriters, but I think it works really well because it's an entire symbol of the entire movie about time and that it's fleeting and it's the one thing that we don't really have control over. I haven't watched this in a really long time from, the opening scene, but it's so strong that they're able to show an entire room of clocks and that we're going back in time, and they just use a clock as like a symbol throughout the whole movie that it's like time is ticking and we don't really have control over it, but we're trying to control it.
Thinking now about the scene, it doesn't really make any sense, but the way it's shot is so thrilling. Like, I know what happens. I've seen this movie a million times, but still I'm on like the edge of my seat when they're trying to get everything to go. And then when Doc accidentally unplugs the cable, I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing? You're not going to do it. He's not going to make it. I've seen so many more movies now since the last time I saw it that I can kind of look at the set design and everything. And it's clearly a backlot set and stuff. Like, it seems like a pretty minimal set, but especially in that scene, I mean, it's just the clock tower and that street really.
There are movies that clearly take place on lots that I hate because I just think that they're so boring. Like, especially now where I dissect every new movie that comes out and it needs to be shot in a unique city or this and that. And I know that there are scenes that aren't actually shot in a lot, but it actually makes it more exciting for me that they're able to create this much friction and excitement and adventure and science, like all in these scenes that are shot in one square. But this time I was like, why didn't Marty move the branch? Like, they knew that they weren't be able to like pull the wire. They're not going to have enough like give. He says, you have less than 4 minutes. Does that not feel like a 15-minute sequence? I was like, where is the time going?
That's amazing how tense it feels every single time. I think the thing that I love most about the clock tower, I was really trying to put myself in the view of, I'm going into the story and I don't know what's going to happen. I've never seen this before. But in the beginning, I'm going back to the scene where him and Jennifer are just hanging out in the town square, and the woman comes up to them rattling her can or whatever, and she wants money to save the clock tower, and he just takes that piece of paper, and the first time you're watching that, you're just like, whatever, like this, you're not even paying attention to it. And they are able to write in this little device where Jennifer writes on the back of the paper that says love you, so it gives him a reason to keep it. And it's not until he's in Doc's house in 1955 where he's trying to tell Doc why it's so important that he goes back, because he has a girlfriend and he has a life. And even though that part is always like a little bit cheesy for me, for him to say like, look what she wrote me, I always get chills when that flyer gets brought back out. And I'm just like, they set this up in the beginning and it was so subtle. It's so hard to get that excited about it, knowing, you know, what ends up happening. But when I look at it from the perspective of being a first time viewer, I think it's just genius.
1997 Red Wing Michelle
Yes.
was losing your mind melted during that part.
What a historical night.
Stanley Cup on one screen,
Yeah.
Back to the Future on the other.
Lunches in hand. Every time I watch movies as an adult now, I'm always like looking for ways that it applies to my current life. But I know that it's supposed to be more like family oriented, but I feel like it has a lot of like deeper adult meanings too. Like you said, Michelle, like as you were describing that entire through line, I just wanted to say it's density. Like basically like no matter, you know, like if you believe in that stuff, like everything happens for a reason and for some greater purpose that you don't understand. And I'm sure that has to be somewhat in the writer's mind of like all these things that we are dropping in, maybe not the TV example, but like the flyer example, like he needed that in order to get to this B point in 1985. Can we talk a little bit about, I would always kind of get like irked with how nerdy and like how much of like a coward his dad is like in the future and in 1955. But I always like by the end, I'm always so like, it's so heartfelt for me to like watch like their relationship grow, that he's like helping his dad during this like time of need. So I was just wondering like what each, like if that was something you guys both like their relationship too.
Yeah, I mean, this time around, I thought both parents were pretty creepy throughout the whole movie. Yeah, like especially Crispin Glover, I was like, oh, he's a creepy guy, especially with that like greasy hair and everything. But by the end, I mean, at the dance, I thought it was kind of nice when they got together. I was like, oh, that's nice.
The reason I, especially this time, I think I liked George McFly's transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always love a good character transformation, and I think they did a really good job of like showing the extreme of how helpless he was, and like it like made me so sad of how much he got bullied and taken advantage of.
Yeah, I felt like that, you know, if this was a series, maybe they would have made that plot line more important to the story, because I can see a version of this where it really is about him understanding his dad. And from what I've read, the idea for this came about when Bob Gale, the writer, was looking through his dad's yearbook and saw a photo of him in high school, and he had the thought, I wonder if I would be friends with my dad if I was his age, like at the same time. And I think it's kind of like a universal thing that kids and parents never quite understand one another. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that kids are really unable to see that their parents were once their age and going through the same things that we're going through. And I do think that in a sense, Marty was able to witness that by going back in time. It seems like in the beginning, like he really does not respect his dad at all. And I don't know that he would have respected him just by interacting with him. Like say it was just like that one interaction at Lou's at the counter. I think that transformation needed to happen for him to kind of see like his dad, like there was more to him, and that he did have it in him to like, you know, not only punch Biff, but then to actually like go after his writing dream. And I do love that little moment when they're in the cafeteria and Marty's like,
Of
It's like,
course, me and
get
Michelle are like,
out. I had no idea you were creative.
it's very cute because they say the same line of like, I don't think I could take that type of rejection, which I know is a little corny, but
I think it's
I
cute.
think I think it works.
It's nice after when he wins back the mom at the prom. And all the people are coming up like, oh yeah, like George, like I heard you beat up Biff, like good job, like you're so cool. And you're like, yeah, like he's cool now. And then like that redhead guy comes over, you're like, get this guy out of here. Like, what is he doing? Like,
I
just
know.
beat him up, George.
I know.
There definitely is it's like an earned transition. I love the scene that you mentioned, Michelle, at the diner when he first meets his dad in the 50s. They show them both like leaning their head in the same way, and then when he yells McFly, they both look. I love that scene. I wish the movie leaned in more to that. Like I love kind of you could have had some fun with the similarities with the dad and the son.
The reason it works with his dad a lot is he's not, I don't know if I'm comparing it to, there's not really like similar movies, but dad and son relationships, like you always kind of I would expect him to be like, oh, Marty's really cool, and like, oh, I want to hang out with this guy. Like he's very reserved, like he ends up softening up to him by the end before they go to the dance once Darth Vader threatens to melt his brain. But other than that, like, I don't know, I always expect him to be more open to Marty, and there's always so much like friction and build up in the beginning that it makes him like a very individual character that is only in this movie.
I like when he says, "Why do you keep following me?"
Yes. Like he thinks he's like a nuisance. Like he's weirded out. The whole thing is weird. I love that introduction to Dom when they're sitting in the diner and he's like, yeah, who are you? Like, stop talking to me. Stop looking at me. Stop following me. I think the reason I think so much of Michelle is because we always not make fun of, I mean, we celebrate it, how much Michelle loves the 50s. We always say that, like, if she was to live in a decade, she was supposed to live there because as a design mind, she loves like retro font. She loves the styles. She loves like the big dresses and the classiness. I mean, clearly she's dressed up as it. But I talk a little bit about the set and the fact that a lot of this is shot on a set, but I love the way that they set it up between the 50s and the 80s. And I always am obsessed with set designs, and it's for a lot of movies. I don't know if this is more of like a nostalgic movie for me and I've watched it for so long, but that's always one of the first things that I look for in movies when I watch them today. And it made me just want to be like a fly on the wall while this movie was being shot and setting up like even some of the props with like Pepsi cans and Miller High Life trucks and all the product placement. I think they just do a really good job of differentiating the time periods, but using one space.
Absolutely. Like, I'm obsessed with having that town square be so central, and this really stretches into the second movie because they're in all three time periods in that movie, which is I think why I love it so much. And what they do in transforming from the 80s to the 50s, they do again for the future. And there's so much artistry that goes into that, into those transformations and all of those little details, the shop signs and the costumes, and even just the way that the courthouse and the clock tower transform between the different eras. Could not love that more.
Also have to give a shout out to my boy Einstein because he is such an adorable dog. I'm not like a huge dog gal, but I love that dog.
But not his, I should save this for the food section, but not his food in the first scene.
Not his food.
So gross.
It's not his fault. Is there anything that we don't like about this movie?
I have a few things.
Okay. I'm excited. As someone, this is your favorite movie, it's not a 10 out of a 10 then.
While they claim that this is a perfect screenplay, I would have challenged Bob Gale to maybe come up with some other way, because I think that the Oedipus kind of storyline is kind of like the one black mark on this movie that like I think that universally people are uncomfortable with it. And I know we say in every episode that we want to like rewrite or create a new version of something. I'm not here to like offer any new suggestions, but there has to be something. He did such a good job on this script. I have to think that like creatively he has it in him to come up with some other device to use. Other than that, this is like a very nitpicky thing, but as much as I love Back to the Future 2 and even Back to the Future 3, even though I think it's the weakest of the three, I hate the ending of this movie, specifically the Doc coming back and saying, you turn out fine, but it's your kids. Something's got to be done about your kids. It feels like such an afterthought after we get this really rich story and strong script. And it almost seems like this was like a last minute addition, and they gave the script to an intern and was like, figure out what Doc should say here. It doesn't really matter. Don't worry about it. Just throw something in like as a placeholder. And then they kept it. And I think the thing that really annoys me about it is that if you've seen Back to the Future 2, their kids are the reason that they get brought there, but it's such a minor point in what that movie ends up being about. So I wish that they could just rewrite that little line and give them some other reason for having to get in the car with Doc at the end.
Or maybe they don't even need to get in the car and it ends on a happy note and we get to see the next movie when we get to see it. And this next movie can start. They show that in the start of the second movie anyway, because they switch out Jennifer's actor.
If they didn't have that ending, you wouldn't get to see Doc in his future outfit and his compost powered
and the roads
DeLorean.
The roads.
As Dom was calling it the Lomi.
The Lomi.
Who knew Doc invented composting?
I don't know how to feel about the Oedipus line, because if I was,
You're pro.
I'm not pro, but I don't feel like they're encouraging it. It's just weird. They're trying to make you so uncomfortable. So they're not like, this is normal. And
they're not promoting
it.
No.
But it's more so that I just didn't want to watch any scenes that Lorraine is in. I don't know. I guess if I were trying to rewrite it, which actually gives me a new form of like disgust and anxiety, is the scene where Biff is like assaulting her in the car. Like I get emotional because I think it's such like a disgusting thought that, and like when I was watching it when I was younger, I wouldn't even think anything of it. I didn't think anything. And now watching it as an adult, it's like such like a awful thing. But that's why I think like George's hero story is that much more impactful, that he like stopped this bad guy from like doing the worst thing that you can do. So I think that entire setup makes it that much more powerful. But like, could we have done that without her needing to make out with her son?
I think
it wouldn't have been as dramatic. Yeah, like, I don't know.
I'm sure they could find a way.
Couldn't she have just gone out with like a nerdy guy in town and Marty's like, George, you have to go in the car and like, I don't know, like save her. I don't know.
I think they could have even just omitted the kiss and that scene would have still worked without it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like maybe she's just like, get out. I'm annoyed that you're telling me to stop smoking cigarettes and drinking, and don't want to be with you. I don't know.
I think it's like a product of its time, because I feel like they had all those raunchy comedies in the 80s, and I think the whole mother-son relationship is like storyline is very weird and kind of funny, and it's like weird in its weirdness. I just wish they would get rid of like the intimate scenes, because it's a little too much.
I think about it this way though, as viewers, we're watching it from the perspective of like, she has to know and she has no idea. So I know that's really difficult to wrap our heads around, that like as a mother you would have some type of instinct, but if it's something that's not even possible to gauge, then like is she acting like a normal teenage girl who just has a crush on a cute boy?
And it's also like someone who has qualities. I mean, people always make this comment that like people end up marrying people who are like their parents. But, you know, I'm sure she's seeing qualities in him that are like her, and that's attractive to her. It's like what she's used to looking at in the mirror every day. But also clearly she's attracted to George, and he has some of his qualities too. Plus they kind of give us that Doc gives us that line about like the Florence Nightingale syndrome. So she's got a lot of forces, you know, out of her control that are making her behave this way.
I think they get some good comedy out of like Marty's clearly trying to do the opposite of what she would like, and he keeps backfiring, and he looks more like attractive to her every time he tries to like take a back seat. So I think that's funny.
Like if we just got rid of like all notions of being like she knows, then I think it works.
Well, I was wondering watching this time why she wouldn't realize that her son looks identical to this guy that she was obsessed with.
That's always
it didn't. It didn't take away out of the movie. Like, I know it's just a comedy, but I was thinking that this time.
So
like he looks the same, sounds the same, dresses the same.
All right. So Jimmy brought this up because he watched it with me for this rewatch. And I kind of said this to him, but then I was able to find it on IMDb that the writer kind of addressed, because I guess this question gets brought up a lot. And I think this explanation makes perfect sense. When you think about someone that you only knew for like 1 week in your life, like 30 years ago, and you have no photos of them and no one else you know knows them and no videos, you're not going to remember what they look like exactly. Like, I don't think that that's going to stay with you. And he even brought it a point further that, you know, a lot of parents, because they love their kids so much, like they see their kids in other people. And he said, you know, if you ended up like flipping through your yearbook, you could point to a random person and be like, oh, my kid kind of looks like them.
Yeah, that's true. I think if they had photo evidence or they stole his video camera, that would be a different story. This is a very minor detail, and it's actually not something that I think is wrong with the movie. And I sound like Michelle. But I feel like there's a lot, everyone's very like greasy in this movie. Like George is like always a mess. Like Marty's always sweating. I know he's nervous. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of like wet, like the actual I don't know why I always remember this, but like the letter that Doc pulls out is like soaking wet, and it just looks so gross. I'm like, why is it wet? Like, what happened in 1985? Did he drop it in the plutonium? What happened? I just feel like everyone's like kind of a mess all the time, I guess, besides Lorraine.
And I also will say, sorry if this is a controversial thing to say, because I know we just talked about how horrible he is, but in a more recent rewatch, and I think I may have texted this to like our sisters, but I found the actor who played like young Biff. I'm like, he's very attractive.
Oh,
and
yeah,
I had and I never thought that, like being younger, but not like his prom look, but like his everyday like school look. Like he's cleaned up. Like he doesn't, for being like a bully, like he's pretty like clean cut looking.
Yeah, he's a great bully. Yeah. Great bully for this film. I would say I'm definitely attracted to 1955 Biff and neither 1985 Biff.
No.
Specifically, I think I'd rather the like mean supervisor Biff than the car waxer Biff, for sure, if I needed to pick.
Yeah, but car waxer Biff, he's he's genuinely excited that the books came in. Like he's turned
over a loaf. Yeah.
That punch changed the trajectory of his life.
I want to know what happened after that. Like, did they all become friends?
Biff has such a good storyline in Back to the Future too.
He does.
So good.
We'll have
That's
to reunite for our Back to the Future
Absolutely. It's going to happen.
sequel season.
Yes.
I know. All the Lorraine Biff scenes make me just so upset, including the second one. So we'll have to get
We
into
haven't
it.
discussed Jennifer.
Which Jennifer does everyone like better?
One.
Definitely one.
Jennifer 2 is older. She seems too old to play that role.
Older than Michael J. Fox, which you already
Yes.
established, Laura. Like, he looks younger than he is.
Yeah.
And Claudia Wells looked, she looks like a little bit older, but more of a, like, I think in high school sometimes like girls just can look older than guys.
Why did they change her?
Her acting skills, maybe? I don't know.
It had no. I think it had something to do. I don't think it was like a recast because she was not received well. I think maybe she wasn't available. But another fun fact: in the Eric Stoltz casting, they also had a different Jennifer.
Oh,
really?
wow.
And it was played
there's
by
three.
Melora Hardin, who plays Jan on The Office.
Oh, wow. I guess I could kind of see that.
Alternate universe Jennifer.
I also didn't get to give this a shout out in the earlier, but I always love the song that he plays at the dance. It really just gets me going.
Johnny Be Good?
Yeah. Great song. And when they call Chuck Berry on the phone, so good.
There's really no need for that scene.
I just love
Right.
it anyway, though. It's so good.
It's so bad that it's good,
What about his band at the beginning? I thought they were pretty good.
Yeah.
They're great.
The Pinheads?
Huey Lewis wasn't having it.
Yeah.
You just reminds me of one other thing that I don't like. Not that I hate this as a device, but the photo of him and his siblings, that they disappear one by one, starting with the oldest. I think Marty's supposed to be the youngest in the family, right?
I was thinking about that this time too. Because who disappears first?
The
oldest
it's like
brother.
age order.
Yeah.
And I feel like that makes no sense. It should either be like all of them at once, or maybe starting with, no, it should just be all of them at once, because
I don't know.
either they have a family or they don't have a family.
Yeah, but we can't really explain time travel and the time, like the year that it is. If like time was linear, right? And you're like thinking about 1985, what like point in time is it? I don't know. Like, is time trying to catch up with itself? Do you know what I mean?
Should this be our audience participation question?
Yeah. Do you think... I don't really care for the photo inclusion, but I also think there's a lot of things that don't really make sense. Yeah. I think it's a little dramatic that he keeps it tucked into the guitar.
And if I'm going to keep going on this tangent, while this movie is like pretty good technically for the year that it was made, that shot where they show his hand disappearing always takes me out of the movie, and it looks so like, I feel like it looks like that little section was made like 10 years prior.
Yeah. The effects aren't great, I don't think.
Yeah.
But I was reading the Wikipedia before we got on the call, and it said that they rushed production because they wanted to get it into theaters earlier, so they had to cut into the special effects time.
Okay.
So that's
Fair.
good. But yeah, I don't think the effects held up, and the old age makeup I didn't think held up that great either.
Yeah.
I'm sure at the time it was fine, but we have better quality TVs now, so it's kind of
Yeah, specifically Lorraine McFly and Mr. Strickland's like prosthetics, like their neck was like all very like grainy, and it just,
Doc's
I don't know.
too.
I think it played into the sweatiness of everything.
Yeah, like at the end when he sees the new Lorraine, he's like, "Mom, you look thin."
Yeah, but she
Like,
looks
I
the
don't know,
same.
She doesn't look that good.
They didn't make her look good enough.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's okay, they tried.
a pretty no-note movie though.
Laura, I think you and I are going to have the same favorite scene. First, I'll give you my backup first. We talked about it already, but the scene where we're sending him back to the future. I just think it's a really great scene. It's really thrilling. I always forget that I know what's going to happen. My actual favorite scene, and what I think is Laura's favorite scene, is the first time Doc and Marty meet up in the 50s, when he goes to Doc's house. That the whole scene, just from beginning to end, is so funny. I've always thought it was funny. There's so many unanswerable questions. Like, again, why does he have this massive ski lodge like house in this town? Why does he have framed photos of like Thomas Edison and Albert Einstein on his mantle? I always laugh when Doc says the Ronald Reagan, the actor.
Yes.
And whose vice was it? Jerry Lewis, I think, is vice president. Yeah. I always laughed. Like, as a kid, I would be cracking up. I didn't know who Jerry Lewis was. Like, I was like, oh, this is so funny. His lines about, this is another scene, but I love the scene when they're back at Doc's lab in the 50s, and he's showing him his town model. He's like, sorry, I didn't have time to make it full scale and to paint it. And then he does the model of the car, and it catches fire. I know this is an audio medium, so I'll try and share the audio version of why this is funny. But I love, and then when Lorraine comes and she's like clearly like flirting with Marty and asking him to the dance, and the Doc's just in the back behind, like looking at him, like pretending not to listen, but he's like literally right next to Lorraine. And just looking like confused. Anything Doc does is he's so funny.
Another fun fact: the only scene in all three movies that Leah Thompson and Christopher Lloyd are in together.
Oh wow!
Dom, for two of your unanswered questions, not that I have the full answer for them, but I guess maybe what the assumed answers were. For how Doc and Marty know each other, I kind of assume that from what we see in the beginning, that like. Mm-hmm. Marty is kind of connected with him so that he'd either like have access to like amps or be able to like play his music, play his rock and roll.
Someone was saying that he like helps Doc out as like a volunteer thing.
Yeah, but why? What's his incentive? Marty doesn't seem like someone who's going out of his way to like help people out.
The ski lodge-esque house doesn't structurally makes sense, but he does mention that his family has like an estate, so the Browns have money that he like inherited, so he gets like tinker around with all of these experiments. But he says it in like passing in one conversation.
I haven't done this personally, although you might think that I would, but I bet if we looked at the three like the newspaper articles about Doc Brown, I think they're shown at the beginning of the first movie, but then more prominently in the second because the headline changes about like, you know, Doc Brown being committed, Doc Brown being like honored. I bet something about like his family would be in that.
Michelle, what about you? This is going to be a hard one.
Can I start with my dissertation on what I think is the most perfect scene in the movie?
Anyone coming off of listening to the previous Jaws episode, I'm happy to report that it seems like whatever scene Michelle is going to share with us is actually a scene that she's watched. So
I have seen this one. This is not my submission for favorite scene, but I think that this is, in talking about like how perfect this script is, I think that this scene best demonstrates like the genius of Bob Gale's writing. And I was thinking about this a lot because I wrote a book and I had been trying to pitch it. And one of the things that I really learned in that pitching process is in a lot of literary agents' wish lists, a lot of them say they're looking for like a high concept story or a high concept project. And Back to the Future is absolutely high concept. It's something that has not been done before. But yet at the same time, when you're submitting stories, and I'm sure this is the same for like submitting scripts, you have to submit along with it like a log line, which is just like a sentence that sums up what your story is or what your idea is. And I think the more high concept the project is, the more challenging it is to do that, to sum up the story. I mean, imagine trying to like explain something like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars without getting into like the world building. The scene that I think did this the best, and we brought this up a little bit before, but It's the scene where we first see Marty and Doc together, and it's where we first see the DeLorean. And I think it's so strong because they're able to squeeze in so many elements into that one scene and explain so much and make it so easy to understand. And when you're thinking about a concept like time travel, even though, like we said, we can poke holes in it, but like you hear it and you're like, oh, I get it. That makes perfect sense. And being able to like see a visual example of Einstein, that 1 minute time travel loop, and having the stopwatches as like a visual aid to help us understand it, and knowing that no time has passed for Einstein. I don't understand how he was able to do all of that and make it like so compact.
And yes. Einstein's so cute when he gets back. He's just like hanging out in the car.
Yeah, they have just the right amount of explanation of the science. There's not too little, so you're kind of left wondering what's going on. There's not too much where it's like over-explanatory and like expository. It's just like just a little enough that you get what's going on, and then you're going with the story.
And it moves so fast. It's so engaging. And then we have this big drama. By the way, I can't believe we haven't talked about the music yet. The score is so brilliant. Mm-hmm. That little cue when the Libyans show up and you see Doc, I think that's like, it's some good acting where you kind of get the sense that like, okay, like this guy's like a little bit nutty. And I love that, he has the little line about like, oh, I made them a bomb made of pinball parts. But then when he realizes they're coming, he's like genuinely rattled, not expecting it. I love that even within this really tight scene that they leave just a little bit of room for these actors to still shine. And the part that I love from Marty in that scene is when he's filming it and there's a part where he's kind of like, he has the camera on Doc and Doc is like, no, keep it on the car. And just like the look on his face is it's saying so much. Like he's taking all of this in and he's so in awe. And the fact that like he had the camera kind of like hanging on Doc is because I think he's just like so wrapped up in what's going on. And I felt like that was such a natural reaction to like what that situation was. Not to mention all the little things just in that scene alone that end up being important later on. My favorite of which is probably the plutonium suits and how they end up using that to like explain that the car needs to run on plutonium, but then they use it when Marty first lands and they think that he's a spaceman. Like they give him a reason for like showing up dressed in the yellow radiation suit, and then of course using it again in the famous Darth Vader scene.
So good. I mean, it was such a good scene that they needed to do it twice. So, and the second time is equally as special and heartwarming.
Yeah, I mean, I think just again praising Michael J. Fox in this role. An issue I have with a lot of movies is that the character acts in a way that is either not realistic to the character or not realistic to how someone would act in that situation, that it kind of takes me out of the movie or it kind of makes me annoyed with the character. But every action that Marty does and everything he says is how anyone would act in that situation. Like in that scene when Doc's explaining to him how it works, like he's acting how anyone in that scenario would act. When he's trying to get back to the future and he's trying to explain to Doc about what's going to happen in the future, he's acting in a way that's realistic to the character and realistic to the relationship that he has with Doc. So it makes it so much more enjoyable. And like there's no point in the movie where I'm annoyed with Marty and like how he's acting or anything.
And you're right, Tom. I think that the scene that both of you talked about at the end when Marty's trying to get back is such a good like compliment to this scene. I think those two are just shining examples of writing, but also their acting chops. All right, can I give my real favorite scene? I'll be a lot shorter about this one. I didn't write an essay about it.
I want to hear your full essay, though. Now you have to write something about it.
This scene upcoming is your actual favorite scene?
Yes. So my actual favorite scene, just from an enjoyment standpoint, is when Marty first steps into the 1955 like Hill Valley town square, starting with like playing Mr. Sandman and him kind of poking his head around the corner, all the way through when he goes to sit. I know this is a little bit of a cheat because it's kind of like a continual with him sitting down next to George, and just the look on his face when he realizes who his dad is it's so priceless. And it really, no one other than Michael J. Fox could do it in that way.
There's so much acting with his face in this movie. Like I think of the scene when he trips Biff, and then Biff stands up and like you see him slowly getting larger than Marty, and you see Marty's face and he realizes that he made a mistake. Just great acting.
I'm sure that's what landed him the role of them wanting him to play that, because he has a gift.
Last little tidbit from that scene, I also really like the part when he looks at the newspaper, because it feels like very eerie. It's like a little Hitchcock moment within that scene.
What about favorite lines for you?
I also really like the Ronald Reagan line. I feel like that's one that Laura and I say a lot. I also really like to keep it presidential, the "Who the hell is John F. Kennedy" line. I think Lorraine's dad is like a really funny character. I like all of his line deliveries. Another line from Lorraine's dad, this is just a often quoted line in my households. We make fun of our little boy cat, Rory. So a lot of times we'll say, he's an idiot, comes from upbringing. I already mentioned the Goldie Mayer scene. I like that whole exchange. I know that's not really like a quote, but the like, "That's right, I'm going to be mayor." And I'll end with the exchange with Doc saying the better question is, when the hell are they? And that's it. How about you, Laura?
This is hard for me because I think it's just such a solid movie that it's so consistent that so many of the scenes, like, I don't really have a one favorite, but Dom is right. That is one of my favorite scenes because I just think it's very comedic. And there's a lot of funny interaction between Doc and Marty in that scene, and then adding Lorraine into the mix. And I also think I just love the moments where it's just the two of them like hanging out in a garage, and you kind of feel like a fly in the wall. But I think one of my favorite scenes, because the line is just so great, is when George is forced to go into Lou's and talk to Lorraine. And the reason I like it so much is because it feels like a dance. Like there's so much going on. And beyond that, I just love diners and 1955. And I wanted to like be in a booth watching this entire interaction. But I think it was just geniusly choreographed that you're kind of slowly brought into this. Like you can feel the anxiety. I love the line where he says, "Lou, milk, chocolate," and then going over to her and being so nervous, and like him stumbling over his words, and the iconic line, like, "My density has brought me to you." And it's very meta because it's this whole idea about like your destiny and what is supposed to be. So I feel like if I were to give this movie a log line, I would just say, Michelle, you and I talk about that a lot. Like if you needed to tell someone to watch one scene or just give them a line, I would tell them, "You are my density." And that's all you need to know about the movie, and just go and watch that. And then I love how it turns into such a dramatization of Biff kind of walking in and everything becomes silent. Like there's so much commotion and chaos and people sitting and hanging out with their friends, and there's the jukebox is playing, and then it stops as soon as he walks in, and it felt very sitcom-ish. I always like really enjoy that part.
Great pick. Anything inside the diner, I think, is
anything inside
choice.
Lou's. And then for favorite lines, I have so many, but most of them are Doc speaking in Doc. Like one line that I'd never noticed before is he says, "Your mother is amorously infatuated with you instead of your father." Like amorously infatuated is so amazing. Obviously, the Jerry Lewis line is probably my top favorite. Michelle and I would always say, who the hell is John F. Kennedy? So I definitely had that one down. Also love when Doc says, like, why, there's that word again, heavy, or is there some type of like cosmic force in the future? Like, can you just imagine being in that situation where you just are imagining things to be so different? And he makes a comment, something about like all the wars and the atomic bombs, and that's why they must have to be wearing the suits. And Marty never, I think that's what makes it so great, is Marty never reacts to them because he's so in his own world that he never makes Doc feel like he's crazy. He's almost just like ignores him because that's just how he speaks.
Yeah, it's like screwball comedy, I guess, in a way, where Doc is just saying the most crazy, outlandish thing, and everyone's just ignoring him.
Yeah.
Oh, also one thing I wanted to add, just more praise for Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox, is this movie could have been really annoying if it spent the whole runtime of the movie with the characters in their different time periods, kind of spending the whole movie walking around being like, oh, like, where's this, or what time period is this? Like, when movies do that, it kind of gets frustrating and kind of annoying after a while. Like, all right, just, get to the point. And here, like, of course, when Marty first gets to the 50s, he's kind of looking around confused, but after like 10 minutes, like, he's kind of gets an age, just moving on with the plot. And same with when he meets up with Doc for the first time in the 50s. Like, at first, Doc doesn't know who he is and kind of dismisses him, but after like 5 minutes, they kind of are on the same page, and then they can just move forward with the plot. Like, I think a worse movie would have spent like a half hour with Doc, dismissing Marty and being like, okay, I don't believe you, like, show me evidence, and then Marty'd have to go. Like, I don't know, it could have been a whole subplot, and this movie kind of did away with that and just got the plot moving, and it definitely was like a better decision.
That just reminded me of another line, though, when you were talking about him showing up to Doc's house. I've always loved the "what the hell is a gigawatt" line, and then cutting to, which Dom, you mentioned earlier, of Doc sitting in the chair, and he's like, Tom, how could I have been so careless? How could I have created something so powerful? So we talked a lot about Luz. I would say we have an average amount of food moments and scenes. We do have a couple of dinner or family table scenes in this movie. But Dom, if you had to pick one food or drink item or just anything that this movie really made you want to eat, what would it be?
I'm conflicted, and I know I'm in the wrong room for this, but Luz doesn't. I'm pro diner, love diners. Luz doesn't look like it's getting a Michelin star anytime soon. I don't think it's really serving up the best food in town. That being said, that's probably the only place in town, it looks like, to get food, considering that's where everyone goes. And I could drink a milk. I'd get like a chocolate milk, some like kind of stale toast. Like, those when you go to a diner and no matter what you get, they always include slices of bread, even if the dish you got is like a sandwich. They'll just give you more bread on the side, like, unnecessarily. That was probably toasted like a week ago. So like, I'm picturing like a tall glass of like room temperature chocolate milk and like slices of white bread with the jelly packets.
Oh,
perfect.
That's good.
This is also like such a weird answer to this, but it's all I've been able to think about since I watched this a few nights ago. And it's not something that I would typically order at a diner, but I just want a bowl of cereal.
That's good. No, cereal tastes better at a diner when they give you the small box that you can't get anywhere else. That's the perfect one portion.
Yeah, and maybe like the little silver thing that you pour the milk out of, and it's really extra cold.
Yeah.
I am anti-cereal at diners because I'm like, okay, it's one thing, like, we go out for breakfast, like, I love like a diner breakfast, right? Or burger, or whatever it is. But like, you're going to go and you're going to order a bowl of cereal.
No, it's a terrible, poor choice, but I've just been craving it since watching this movie.
This probably speaks poorly on me, but I think the cereal has to be a side dish. It can't be the main course. I think you need to get,
that's allowed.
An additive.
I haven't seen that done before, but like, Dom and I always laugh because one of our friends always gets like the Hungry Man's breakfast, where it's like a stack of pancakes, bacon, sausage, eggs, hash brown. You want the works, toast. You could get the cereal with that, but you can't get it alone. I wonder if that was a thing that people went and ate breakfast at Lou's. It's kind of nice. It's a little adult that you get to like go into town and have a bite before you go to school. But
I'd go. It seems kind of fun.
it sounds fun.
I would also order the very small cup of coffee, and like I love the sounds that the cup makes and like the change on the counter in that scene.
Yes. Just like a nice
rattle.
I was thinking that. I was like, I want to bring back like the diner being the place that people hang out. That's my kind of scene. Like late night, hanging at Lou's, having a milkshake. For me, I want chocolate milk or milkshake. I'm not even a big chocolate milkshake person. I'm usually lean towards strawberry vanilla, but I think because they mentioned chocolate milk, then I want a chocolate milkshake. And I think I've said this in every...
It has to slide down the...
Yes,
the bar
it has to be
into your hand.
slid, and it needs the straw that is red and white and not paper, because they didn't have paper straws in 1955. They needed a nice sturdy one. And I've said this in every podcast episode, but no one even eats a cheeseburger in the scene, but you know that they had a good cheeseburger there. Or do you think it was a good cheeseburger back then, or do we think it was like dry?
Did either of you read or watch the 11/22/63 series?
No.
So it's the Stephen King story about the guy who goes back in time to try to stop the JFK assassination. Minor spoiler, but there's a character who owns a diner, and he time travels, and the food at his diner is the best because he like is going into the past and bringing back like burger meat from the 60s, and like everyone in present day is like, how is this so much better? So I have that in my head, that the ingredients were all better then, even though I have to think they had like less access to things than we do now.
Yeah, but I feel like they had like good tomatoes, lettuce, meat.
I don't know.
Good cheese.
I'm sure it was a very good value. Like, I don't think Lou's overcharging anyone. I think it's a good deal.
50 cents. I just love the concept. Like, we don't have that anymore of like where everyone is hanging out. Like, what's like the spot in your town that everyone goes to? Because they're all like ironic now.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They're not cool. Like, they try and be funny and retro. I just want the real deal. I think that's going to be my new, instead of, Michelle and I always come out of these podcast episodes with ideas for writing, but I think my business concept is I'm just going to come up with like a cool diner.
This isn't my favorite food, but I am kind of curious about that Uncle Joey eating jail cake.
I know.
It's got the vanilla icing, but I'm just... I'm
dabble.
not a cake person, but I'm just kind of curious what's going on underneath that icing.
No
Is
one
it
eats
chocolate?
it.
Is it vanilla? I don't know.
I have a feeling there's some alcohol in there. I feel like she sprinkled some in the batter.
Maybe like a rum cake, right?
Like
Is
a
that what it's
rum
called?
cake, yeah. I also really want, I can never get a good look at the full scape, but the breakfast, which is also a great scene, we didn't say this, when he's like, what the hell is this? And his sister says breakfast. So confused. But I always look at the grapefruit in the bowl. It's such a great spread. Dom, we got to start making like a full spread of breakfast.
I want to
more.
live the fantasy of a 80s comedy movie where the mom spends 5 hours making a full plate of a full table of breakfast, and the kid runs in, grabs one piece of toast, and is late for school and has to run away and not eat any of the delicious food the mom made.
Yeah,
it happened like 3 times in this movie.
Iconic.
For all of our Film to Table pod listeners, dedicated listeners, what other movie do Michelle and I like that we get very upset because breakfast is uneaten? This is a good scavenger hunt for you. Please comment on YouTube or on our socials. We want to know. Do you know what it is, Michelle?
Yeah, it's a big one.
It's a big one.
Literally big. Yeah, I mean,
I'm getting hungry
not the
talking
movie
about
big,
it.
but
Yes.
I could go for that meal.
We haven't done
right
big yet. We've done enough Tom Hanks movies. Okay, well, I am super excited for this dinner party because there's a couple of like dinner table scenes in this, but we've gone a little crazy in our Spielberg season. We've taken adventures. We've had a lot of dinners not at tables. We've had them in Jeeps. We've had them in caves. I think for this one, we'll do a similar approach of what we did with Jaws. So, Michelle, I will give you someone, you give Dom someone, and Dom has to give me someone from the movie. Michelle, why don't you set our setting? Where are we going to have this potluck?
Why don't we have it at the Baines residence?
At the Baines residence. Yeah, they look like they have
They have a big table. They have a
big
TV.
Table. I think that they have a leaf table, so
Yeah.
we can make it smaller too for 3. What do we think?
The kids will have to move to a kids' table, but
Yeah. Specifically her brother who has a beaver hat, and no one has explained that yet or mentioned it. Okay, so Michelle, I'm going to give you Mr. Peabody. What is
okay.
Mr. Peabody bringing to this potluck?
I think that he will probably bring something from his farm. I mean, I know he's a tree farmer, but I'm going to say that he has zero experience in the kitchen and outsources it to his wife, but he shows up with it and does not give her any credit. And I think that he's bringing a bucket of fried chicken and a cherry pie that sat on a windowsill to cool before he brought it.
We love. I also am picturing him bringing, like, because he's so obsessed with trees, like a little tree plant instead of like flowers.
Like he's known for always bringing trees places.
He's like, I love my pines, so this has to be included at the dinner table.
Dom, I'm gonna give you. Are we crossing time? Can it be from either era?
I mean, we've got a DeLorean.
We got a DeLorean.
Since I've brought him up several times, I'll give you Mayor Goldie Wilson. And so it can be him as mayor or him as the person who's cleaning up the town by sweeping the floor.
I think I'm going to use the employee at Lou's Goldie. He would probably be bringing kind of like frozen brick burger patties and eggs that were already cooked. So they're kind of just cold and like gelatinous.
Okay.
And everyone at the party's like, oh, thanks for bringing this. And no one has the heart to tell them that no one's going to eat. So it just kind of stays on the table uneaten. But he doesn't seem like the kind of person that would be offended by that.
Yeah. He would just be like having a good time. He's so nice.
Yeah. I think that he would also bring one of those like metal condiment / napkin holders, like all in one. Like he would just pick up the whole thing and bring one with him.
You know what I think?
What they have at Johnny Rockets, like
yeah,
the straw dispenser.
Oh, Johnny Rockets. That is like the one like ironic diner, Lou's-esque place that they've created that like I used to like the food when I was younger. I'm not going to lie. Because it's the first thing you saw when you walked into the Palisades Mall South entrance.
Are you going to become a Johnny Rockets franchise owner?
I am. Where everyone has to wear the hats. I think that Goldie quit. It's like he's like, I'm quitting and I'm taking these napkins with me and the burgers. What about a jug of chocolate milk?
This is a lot for him to carry.
And I don't think Lou would notice that there's inventory missing. It doesn't seem like someone who's really keeping on top of that.
No. He's like a kind of a
He's
hard
definitely
ass,
underreporting income.
Yeah.
You know, it's a cash only business.
Coin only.
I think he gives a lot of free milk at that place.
Yeah, he doesn't seem like he's really keeping on top. As long as he's making an income, that's all that matters.
Yeah. All right, Dom, who are you giving to me?
How about Red, the scene-stealing homeless man at the end of the movie who may or may not be
non-mayor Red.
50s? I mean, these are dinner conversations to have with him. Ask him about his backstory. Was he the mayor? Was it just a lookalike with the same name?
Okay, so I'm thinking that He's not bringing alcohol because he judged Marty for drunk driving. He was like, this damn drunk driver. He's going to bike there sober. You know what? I'm spicing things up because it's the last episode of the season. I think that he's going to bring some movies for everyone to watch at the end of this dinner party, because I don't know if you guys noticed, but there was like an XX rated sign in town, and he's trying to, you know, make this group get a little crazy. I mean, this movie is already a little R-rated based on what we're saying. So they're going to watch some XXX movies together. And maybe he's going to bring like a carton of orange juice. I feel like he's like a pulp guy.
Opened or unopened?
Opened. Definitely open. Like it's been there for a while. This has to be the best dinner party we've planned so far.
Mr. Peabody, Goldie, and Red. Are watching porn together at Lorraine's parents' house on the little TV.
Yes, in the roll-in TV. They've had the same one for 30 years. And they're drinking orange juice because he's sober. We're not having alcohol. And it's a good pairing because we have the vinegary eggs, as Dom had mentioned. So we have it's almost like a brunch potluck. Some chicken. Honestly, sounds pretty nice.
I'm wondering what Lorraine's dad is going to think about these guests.
I think he's going to say that they're all idiots, but I think he's going to sit and
all these people traveled. Actually, no, Goldie didn't travel in time, but Red, the homeless man, traveled back in time from the 80s.
Mr. Peabody is practically a neighbor.
Honestly, this may be like
so that's some good conversation.
I think this is pretty on brand because Joey went to jail. We don't know what he did, so maybe this is like Joey's welcome home party.
Oh, it's set in the 80s.
Oh, I know we had it set in the 50s, but maybe Joey gets out of jail and finds the DeLorean and goes back to 1955.
Goes back in time with Red.
As an adult.
Yeah, he brings Red.
Party.
Okay.
Red has a +1, so he breaks Joey out of jail.
Yeah, perfect.
It says, hey, I know you don't know me, but I'm Red, the homeless man. Do you want to travel back in time to this?
We're going to go hang out with the future.
There's some good
mayor.
discussions that they had at that dinner.
Yeah.
You used to be a mayor, correct? And you traveled back in time?
Maybe this is the backstory of how Goldie became mayor, because he got tips.
Yeah.
From a former mayor.
He's like Biff in the second movie where he's doing like inside trading.
What are they trading? The eggs?
They should make a Back to the Future 4, and it's like 2 where they show Marty behind the scenes of everything that happened in part 1, but it's actually Red who's behind the scenes, who's actually conducting everything.
Well, I know that this dinner party is going to inspire a lot of our listeners for their next summer potluck get together. So let us know, drop us a line if you ended up bringing some opened orange juice and a ketchup caddy from your local Johnny Rockets. We want to know. Save some money out there, folks.
Maybe this is the new trend for potlucks. Just bring used opened food.
Yeah.
I mean, times are tough in this economy.
This will be the next TikTok trends, leftover dinner parties.
Yes.
It started here.
We weren't planning on doing this, but we do have a bonus episode coming out.
It's an encore episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. Spielberg is still involved, so make sure you follow along for our socials to see what we're releasing next week.
So much mystery.